In preparation for today's session, I was a little bit skeptical because I went where anyone who knows nothing about CCTV and AI, I went immediately down a spiral of they're going to be looking at me in the shower, which was quite a scary thought. And it descended into something where I had to go and do a little bit of work and investigation. And luckily, Stephanie and Jason took us through quite a lot in the preparation and just opened my eyes to just how wide the gambit of CCTV and capturing information is. And it's no longer about a camera looking at a room, but it's about intelligence and automation for the organization and extending the footprint all the way through the value cycle. I was blown away by what the technology offers. And I'm so glad that we've got Stephanie and Jason who can just give us a grounding so that we're all on the same page before we start to ask questions, because all the stupid questions have already been asked by me. So therefore, I would encourage you to ask any other questions that will be much cleverer than what I was asking regarding where this technology can be used. And we will have a very interactive discussion after we've had our presentations. And we're going to be starting with Stephanie, who has many years, not that many years, Stephanie, but many years specializing in connected environments. And Stephanie has the ability to sit in our shoes. So she interprets what the technology is and then puts it into very good English that I can understand and makes it tangible as opposed to a slide deck that we're going to be looking at. And Jason, who is the regional sales manager for digital TV and CCTV for Dell, then takes it to the next level, which is actually the technological building blocks to make this a sustainable and an expandable enterprise solution for the organization. So Stephanie and Jason, thank you very much. We're going to be looking at the time, Stephanie. So we want to get to the Q&A as quickly as possible. We've got a number of attendees, and I'm sure they're chomping at the bit to put you to the grill.
I'm very excited today to talk to you about the evolution that we've got and we're experiencing in surveillance and in artificial intelligence. I think for me, the most important thing is that we can see that the camera has changed completely. And we like to think about the camera as becoming the major multi-purpose sensor device that can feed a whole host of information into our business organizations. Traditionally, we dealt with information pertaining to security only. Now we're looking at information that deals with operations, manufacturing, health and safety, and so forth. So I'm going to move on to the four main trends that we're experiencing over the last 12 months. Please share your thoughts afterwards as well. But after the discussion that we had internally and with Jason as well, the four main things that jump out at us is firstly that we've seen that artificial intelligence have moved to the edge. And for those of you that's been in the industry for a while, you'll see that the artificial intelligence started off as a centralized solution. And then slowly but surely it's moving to the edge. We've now seen a number of camera manufacturers, OEMs, that have developed artificial intelligence specifically linked to a camera. And you can deploy that at the edge. The second thing that I want to talk about is, I think quite exciting, is the explosion we're anticipating in artificial intelligence. So there's an organization that was established, the Open Security and Safety Alliance, a couple of years ago, with a main drive or focus to establish standards for IoT. And what they're trying to do, what is the main drive today, is to develop an open source operating system. And what that would do, for those of you that share my maturity, would remember the BlackBerry phones. And when they came out, there were specific applications that was only associated with a specific model. And we went bragging about to say, we've got the latest model. And with that, we get 2 or 3 different applications we can use. We know what happened to the industry with the standard platforms that was developed. We had Android platform, we have Apple platform. And what happened is we suddenly had access to thousands and thousands of applications. And we, as consumers, could choose what we wanted. And we are going to experience exactly the same thing in terms of surveillance and artificial intelligence. Once we've got this open platform, we believe that the barriers of entries will disappear and we'll suddenly have access to thousands of applications independent of our various OEMs. And I think also for business purposes, that would be really important because it means that the capital investment that we've made already to establish infrastructure means that we can chop and change the various applications that we're going to deploy on top of it, which makes it capable to customize for specific environments or specific areas within our business. Then I want to just touch on a little bit the move to the cloud. I think we've all experienced it. We've seen a number of VMS providers close relationships with our typical Azure and AWS. I know IBM Cloud is also looking at the surveillance and security or artificial intelligence. I think it's in its infancy. We've seen a number of commercial models that's currently being tested in the market. And I think there's still quite a lot of work that needs to happen before we have mature commercial models that we can deal with. And then lastly, we've seen the merging or the convergence of security and the IT industry. Just a couple of examples. You know, in the olden days, when you look at security, it was something that was a separate division and it sat in facilities. Today, we see a whole host of engagement between IT and security. We're just looking at endpoint securities. We're looking at the vulnerabilities. We're looking at WAN networks in terms of optimizing bandwidth. We're looking at the workload evaluation, as Jason said, in terms of moving some of that workload into the cloud. So we anticipate that that organizational model will change over time.
Stephanie, before you go to your next slide, Jose asked a question, which is, do the systems integrate the mobile devices into the surveillance to contextualize some ad hoc videos to lever the system AI? And I think you've given us the answer, which is an explosive yes, but do you want to expand on it or are you going to come to it later?
I can show some examples, Daniel, but I think that it depends on which applications it is. But the whole idea is in this centralized platform, and I'll share a little bit more detail about that. It's essential that in the choice of that standardized or VMS platform, that when we choose a platform, we think about the integration of the future. And if we close that platform off, it's going to be incredibly difficult for us to expand as new features and functions becomes available.
So Jose, to answer your question, the answer is yes. And that's a sales yes. The caveat is that you've got the right people architecting the solution and that can anticipate where you're going. So this predictive analytics and promoting action is what we should be demanding from people like Jason and Steph.
So just to expand on that question very quickly, like Steph has said, you have to make sure that your system that you choose, your partner that you choose, has that ability in their VMS. But we can push video down to the mobile device or we can pull video from the mobile device. So your guy on site, if he's a security guard, if he's the ops manager or whatever, he can go live on his mobile device and that will stream into the video system as well. So that's something to keep in mind.
Perfect.
And it's not just video. I mean, Jason, we can get to the point where we only show alerts. I think the most important thing for me is companies all over has made a massive capital investment in terms of establishing networks, storage and compute. They've got devices, access control, fire detection. All of those components need to ultimately integrate into your video management. Or now, today, we talk about a data management system. You'll see on the far right-hand side of the screen, in most of the implementations we've done, we've seen that the bottom part of the infrastructure readiness is approximately 80% of the costs of deploying a solution. But we found that the application layer at the top represents about 20%, but it has the potential to generate about 80% of the value going forward. So without spending too much time on the actual portfolio itself, if you allow me, I want to just talk about 4 main areas. The first one I want to talk about is just the video and data management system. I think, as we said before, this is probably the most important decision that you'll make in the next 5 years, is to decide on a platform that will allow you the capability to integrate. And that integration is no longer just cameras. Those days are gone. We're now looking at the integration of IoT devices, and we're specifically looking at creating metadata. So why is that so important for us? That the metadata and the data that we generate or we collect or aggregate from all of these devices has the potential to be extracted into a BI tool or a business intelligence tool. So now suddenly we can use this information to do trending, to do analysis. We like to talk about or use the term actionable intelligence. And traditionally, this was just for security environment. What we're now saying, with this multi-purpose camera tool, we now can use the same device and generate information that's relevant for marketing and sales, is relevant for a production or an operational environment. So instead of talking about slides, let's give you a couple of videos where we actually show you as a real case study where we've deployed this, what are some of the benefits that can be derived. So if you allow me, the first one that I want to talk to you is artificial intelligence, specifically behavioral analytics. We've added the deep learning component because obviously we need still human intervention, but we need the system to learn from its previous experiences. So for those of you that have not had previous exposure to behavioral analytics, really what it does is we use the multi-purpose camera device. We deploy it in a specific area. It learns what is normal behavior and then generates alerts when we have abnormal behavior or behavior that's not common practice in that specific area. This allows us that our operators or our production personnel don't have to watch thousands of screens of rolling video. We can now only focus on event-based monitoring. So let me show you a couple of examples. So in this instance, the camera was deployed for about 10 days. It was able to identify certain objects. It classified those objects and it looked at normal behavior patterns. You'll see at the bottom end of the screen, it immediately picked up the car that was busy making a U-turn. I know maybe that's not a really good example for South Africa, but it is just
I'd be famous.
But this is really the capability that it would immediately pick up on what we then term unusual behavior. Just another example that we had, it immediately picked up the adjacency of the vehicle and the person, and that could be, potential accident or a hijacking, but it would immediately generate the alert for you. This is just another example. This specific area was identified as a no-go zone, and it would immediately trigger a notification. This is in a production environment. Just another example. We also can pick up stoppages in a production chain. So immediately that would generate an alert for you, and it can trigger the corrective action that's needed. So this is not security related, but this could mean quite a lot in terms of making sure that we keep the production line running and we can address any stoppages as soon as possible. I hope the background noise is not too much, but I'm sharing with you a couple of examples that we've deployed just to show you what is seen as unusual behavior. So the little boy went up the wrong side of the escalator. Here it picked up a person throwing objects at the train. Obviously that's not usual behavior. Climbing a fence would immediately generate an alert because it's abnormal. You can also use this in terms of staff control. So here we've got a situation where we have tailgating and could even pick up things like that. I had a look at this video initially and I thought, what's happening here? What is the problem? And I couldn't pick up anything abnormal except the person doing his stretching exercises early in the morning. This is in a correctional facility, and what happened here is the person came in while he was stretching, he was switching off the metal detector, and immediately the abnormal behavior was picked up, not necessarily telling you that the metal detector was being switched off. Here, a gentleman running in a retail facility, an alert is being picked up. It was there for 6 seconds. If somebody was watching this video from a control center, might have missed it. It picked up the erratic behavior, and he was waving around a firearm. Here's another application possibly for health and safety. We know in the mining and production environment, health and safety is of really great importance. So here's just another example of the applicability. Then the next one is really what we're trying to do is we're taking the video footage that we receive from cameras, and we're going to take the raw footage and convert it into actionable intelligence. So how do we do this? So just a brief example. So this is just a camera picking up specific footage. You'll see there's a number of people moving in the screen. I'm going to highlight the lady that's on her bicycle. And the rich data that we're collecting for this lady is we know she's female. We know she's traveling on a bike. Primary colors is white, secondary color is black, and she's traveling at 10 miles per hour. So that just shows you the capability of generating metadata from video. Here, it gives you the capability to provide you with a synopsis of the video. So instead of watching video for 30 minutes, I can provide you with a video synopsis in 53 seconds. I can also ask you, please take out and just show me all the females dressed in blue traveling in a specific direction, or cyclists traveling in a different direction. It's from the same database of information that we can collect this. So what can we give you? We can give you, over and above the synopsis, we can give you the common paths traveled, the traffic analysis, common paths, dwelling times, and actually for retail, we can tell you how many times a specific product was touched. So I'm going to show you this video briefly. It is a case study, and I think it demonstrates the capability quite clearly.
First and foremost, I know drug trafficking, a lot of it's done on foot. A lot of people, because a lot of drug-dependent people will walk up to a house or to a car and buy drugs. So first thing I do is I go over to my class, and I just want people. So I eliminate all the car noise. So now I just have the people that go through the scene in a 24-hour span of time. And I'm actually watching that in 9 minutes and 44 seconds. So I figure out now the next thing I want to do is where do these people go the most? So I use the paths.
The paths.
And right then and there, I have my drug deals in seconds because there's the frequency meter right there, and I can see the path. So these two houses were in concert, and we did search warrants on these later. But I also want to know, just for my own edification, how many people just go to that little door, like right there, every day? How many people go into that intersection? And this time, because I went a little higher, it's 400 because they cross underneath here too. So you can see every one of these people walking, and all these people are going, and the car gets in, are going right to that. Look at that. Does that look like a regular house deal, or does that look like a drug market? It's a drug market. How long did that take me to do? That took me a minute.
What would you have done otherwise?
Sat outside, the old school way. I used to go at 4 in the morning with a sleeping bag, a granola bar, and a set of binoculars, sit on a rooftop and call in drug deals.
We've also deployed the technology now with COVID, the terrible pandemic. To comply with regulations, we have artificial intelligence that can do pre-screening for us, fever screening, and also that fits into, that complies with all of the requirements, and we've deployed this in Datacentrix in our group as well, specifically in our storage and warehouse environment where we have very high foot traffic and we don't want to create a bottleneck in terms of movement of people. That's me wrapped up. Thank you.
What I'm going to talk about today very briefly and at a high level rather than getting too technical is to showcase or give you an idea of that underlying infrastructure that's going to drive the solutions, that's going to drive the technology. If we look at my screen, I think it's quite a poignant picture this, where you could be the IT manager, you could be the security manager, and looking out over your system, or if you're a city manager, if we're looking at it from that context, is how do I manage everything that's in front of me? How do I make sure that I have what I need for today and be able to use that tomorrow without doing forklift upgrades all the time and that sort of thing? So you're going to start to understand that we're in the middle of this absolute data explosion. We're seeing more and more devices being used. We're seeing more and more devices being deployed out there in the field. And much of that revolves around video data. You can't turn on CNN. You can't look at ABC News or E! News or anything like that without seeing some kind of mobile video that's been captured, whether it be by people in the street, whether it be by body cams on police officers and that sort of thing. So we're just seeing new use cases, new ways in using video. You know, a camera is no longer a camera anymore. It really is this edge device that begins to augment and support your system and be able to start using that information in different ways. So if we start to look at it from a retail perspective, so to speak, we've all seen on the news that certain retailers in the US are doing checkout free shopping. You no longer have a teller sitting in an aisle checking out all your goods and that sort of stuff. That's enabled through video, through analytics, but it's no point or no use having that kind of technology if you don't have the underpinning infrastructure to actually make it work. So this is where the challenge starts to come in, is we have lots of wonderful and fantastic ideas, and there's going to be a whole lot more coming out as well. So, if we're looking at it from a production environment on an oil rig or in a mine and that sort of thing, how do we do maintenance going forward? Can I use video surveillance to augment and change the way that I actually do it? I have an operator, he's busy working on a machine that breaks down, and it might take me 2 hours to get a technician underground. But if I use video surveillance or body cams and start to stream that back into a control room, we can overlay what that image should look like. If it's a pump, where should that dial be? If it's a piece of machinery, what should it look like in a good state? And that guy on the ground actually starts to become a technician in his own right, guided by somebody in the control room or out in the field or in another country. But that person will be able to overlay types of images of what that should look like, etc. So using video, using data, and starting to make our lives a lot easier. If we take a step back, and now we have to look at the days of DVR-like solutions are over. We can no longer continue to do things the same way. Just like we've all transitioned from using a telephone in our own home, now we have a mobile device that has become all-encompassing. And for those of you who have kids, we've probably become to hate Apple iPads and cell phones and that sort of stuff, because that's all our kids do these days. But they're teaching us at the same time. And we need to be open to looking at new ways of doing things. And that's exactly what's happening with video surveillance. As I said, there's a lot of new devices that are coming out. We're using drones. We're using body-worn technology in conjunction with drones. So, if we take it into something that's quite topical, which is saving the rhino, that sort of thing, we're tracking rhinos on their paths throughout Kruger Park and private game reserves. But in the instance that something goes wrong, we're taking telemetry from the rhino or from a person even through wearable tech. And if something goes wrong, a drone can be dispatched and actually sent off to site. I'm working with some local municipalities where in the event of an accident, in the event of a fire that's captured on video surveillance, where now they're looking at the ability to dispatch a drone as the first responder to actually see what has happened on scene, who do I need to send out, and how many? Is there going to be 4 ambulances needed? Do I need some kind of protective services on the ground? And that sort of thing. So we're starting to, as I say, take a lot of information that's video-based, it can be audio-based, it can be sensor-based, and integrate that into our solutions. So there's some really cool AI, so artificial intelligence, some machine learning. We need databases to house that. We need something to actually be a central repository and have some kit that's going to be able to take that evidentiary footage or take that information, mine it, and come up with some usable BI for the business. So with that comes challenges. If we continue doing things the way that we do today, if I take a step back and say, well, the way that we've always done it in video surveillance or in security is I have a DVR and NVR for my video recording. Then I have another system that's going to run my access control. Then I have another system that's going to run my alarm systems. Then I'm going to have something that, if I'm really, really cool and awesome, I'm going to have building management. Start looking at what my water flow is, what my electrical usage is, and that sort of stuff. But what happens in the data center is that we have server after server after server after server. So for an IT manager, or for a security guy, he's like, I don't know how to manage this. I don't know how to look after it. It's too much work. It becomes a nightmare. But then also when I want to scale, going back to the board or going back to business and saying, guys, I need another 2 million, 3 million Rand to be able to put in our access control system. But you've just bought a whole bunch of kit. So, security is always seen as these guys who just got their hands up. We need money, and there's no perceived value in that. And we're starting to see, and this is where partners like Datacentrix come in, is how to give value to these systems and give value to the teams that are often seen as just a cost center. I've got an example from a client of ours. They've got over 1,000 cameras looking on large perimeters, looking in production environments and that sort of stuff. But one day a week, they have 2 admins who are spending time moving data and managing data. So it becomes quite a time-consuming system. So it's not just that perceived initial cost of buying the wrong equipment or buying the right equipment but using it in the wrong way. Let's put it that way. We need to start streamlining systems so that there is no compromise on uptime and availability of the system. So as I've referenced a little bit, we look back at the way things to do. And when I started looking at this picture, and I look back to the way that we used to do video surveillance 10, 15, 20 years ago, nothing has really changed. You have a camera at the edge. Then we have some kind of ingest device, which in these days with IP cameras is a switch. And then it comes into a computer or a server today. 20 years ago, that was a video recorder, a VHS cassette player that just recorded video. And then it just started to eat its tail, and it would overwrite the footage. Or we would go and save that tape if it had something interesting on it, and we would keep it forever and hope that when we needed it again, the fidelity of that tape was actually still there. Now, we all remember in our cassette players and cars, we used to have a pencil and we used to, shake our tapes around because the tape would actually come out. And this was the same thing with that. So then we moved on to hard drives, and we started putting hard drives into DVRs. And then we moved from analog onto IP, and we started using servers. So the architecture hasn't changed much. So we're never going to be able to do anything different, anything better, and make our lives simpler and have a better return on our investment. So this leads to systems of the future. It starts to look pretty complex. And going back to the lady in the beginning of the slide, she's looking out at this. You're an IT manager or you're a security manager, and you're like, I'm being tasked with transforming the way that we use our surveillance, to transform the way that I use my systems to have better BI, business intelligence. I want to offer more to my organization. But this is what stands in front of me. So when we were in school, teachers always said to us in math class, and I wasn't very good at math, so this helped me a lot, was let's make it simple. Let's break it down. It's a very complex, very compound problem. But what it is at the end of the day is a system of systems. And that's just what we need to keep in mind is how many systems do I need? How can I get those systems to actually work together? And where is the data going to sit? Is it going to sit in the data center? Is it going to sit at the edge? Is it going to sit somewhere in between? And what am I going to do with the data at those different points? I can do edge analytics. I can send back the redacted data that I need back into the data center and do some more crunching there. But we need to start looking at it from that point of view. So let's break it down a little bit. So we're a big retail chain or a big mining operation. We have sites around the country or sites within a big city. And instead of having to put everything all in one place, we can now start to distribute that architecture. So if we look at the edge where the cameras would always reside, we can start to look at things like our Power Edge, our XE series, or our normal workstations, where we can start to ingest that data. Using our XE series GPU-enabled servers, we're now able to start to run a lot of that analytics rather than bringing everything back into the data center, which is saving money, saving time, allowing us to be more proactive in our system. So as I say, we need to break it down. I think that's the point, is don't be overwhelmed by these systems of systems. Between a company like Datacentrix, between Dell, we're able to take those, break it down, make it simple, make them friendly and not scary anymore. So we have the right resources in place, which I'll get to in a minute as well. So what are we looking at for tomorrow? We need to have a smart system at the end of the day. We're no longer just going to be putting in our cameras. We need to start thinking about how are we going to integrate drones or how are we going to integrate environmentals. Okay, so there's a lot more data that's going to start coming in. So we need to have fit for purpose design. You need to understand what your end state is or what your business requirements are, and then we come and get involved with you and start to scope that and outline the types of technologies, the types of solutions that you're going to be using for that. One of the biggest challenges that we had, if I look back at the current way of doing things, is, I'm a security manager. I have 1,000 cameras or 500 cameras. I say to my integrator, how many cameras can you put on a server? Well, okay, that's it's a how long is a piece of string kind of question, but generally we have about 60 to 100 cameras going on a server. And the challenge with that is that, you as a customer have gone and bought a $3,000 processor that goes into that machine, but you're only ever going to use 10 to 15% of that. When we look and see what the actual utilization is of video surveillance appliances, it's very, very low on RAM, very, very low on CPU. Yet we have to go and buy, fairly robust CPUs to make sure that we can run the system, or that server only comes with those types of processors because I want, lots of storage behind it. So what happens is, and as I say, we have this data center sprawl. We have racks and racks of equipment. I've been into control rooms where they literally have 10 or 12 different racks full of servers because either they want redundancy or they have a limited capacity as to how many cameras they can actually run on that server. So we're looking at doing it a different way. We're saying, let's virtualize this. Let's go and put a validated appliance down, which we use with our VxRail appliances that we've developed jointly with VMware. And what we then do is we virtualize the entire environment. We virtualize the compute, we virtualize the storage, we virtualize the networking. And we're able to then start to get to about a 70-80% utilization on the actual CPU. So a case in point, a client of ours, they were in the middle of refreshing about 14 video surveillance NVRs. And we started looking at, do we just go with the traditional way of doing things with boxes of tin, or do we actually start to look at this new VxRail hyperconverged infrastructure? What actually happened in the end, to cut it short, is that we gave them 4 VxRail nodes out of the 14 servers that they actually needed, and they saved themselves about 15 to 20%. Plus, we gave them another 50% over, well, they had, let's say, 600 cameras, and then they were going to go to 1,000 cameras. 600 cameras was 14 servers that they were running. We gave them 1,000 camera capacity on 4 VxRail nodes at a cheaper cost. So buying new technology, it's not like an iPhone. When you're going to go and buy an iPhone, spend, you might take out a second mortgage these days to buy an iPhone. But when we look at doing things smart, doing things the right way and engineered, we generally can save cost up front, but then also the operational costs behind that become a lot cheaper. So that's pretty much what the system will look like. We'll have our VMS spanned and our VMs spanned across that VxRail cluster, everything completely virtualized. And then you can choose to have onboard storage or, some kind of target after that, an Arsalan or an ECS. But so we're not going to get into too much on the actual nitty-gritties of the technology here. But really what you should be looking at is, how do I do more with less, or repurpose some of the equipment that I have? One of the other things that we've done for them is the normal physical servers that they've got. We said, let's put some GPUs in there, and we start to use those as analytics engines. So running AI, machine learning, and that sort of stuff will start to leverage off of that type of kit that we repurpose at the end of the day. So some of the challenges that we've gone through, how do we address those challenges, but how do we guarantee to you that it's actually working? So Dell has got a couple of video surveillance labs throughout the globe. So we have a main lab based in Limerick, but then we also have demo centers, Dubai, Texas, and Ireland. So if you want whiskey, once COVID is locked down, we can go out down to Ireland. If you want some good ribs and chicken, we go out to Texas. So Dubai, if you want to visit the Burj, we go there. But really, we're working in our labs to make sure that what we're offering you is validated. We're working with the OEMs. We're working with the VMS vendors. We work with NVIDIA. We work with Intel on their Metropolis projects. And we're working with all the guys that we need to work with to make sure that you as a customer at the end of the day get a validated and a proven solution. And Datacentrix are able to take you as a customer into our lab and say, Mr. Customer, what is your requirement? What kind of AI do you want to run? Give us footage from your site. We're going to run that in a live environment, and we're going to run it through its paces, and we're going to make sure that you've got the best engineered solution that we possibly can give you.
And Jason, just to cut you off there, I think that's part of our discussion point when we get to the open discussions, and folks who are attendees, that's an offer that Dell has made. And I think there were a couple of key points that I took out there. A camera is not a camera anymore. This is more of an edge system which is feeding information into the organization. We can shorten the time to resolution about business problems, and things have changed so rapidly in the last couple of years. We should be like the parents who are listening to their kids about how to use the apps and be open to listen to that. I know I had a stint in a company that does a lot of, they're very Rhino focused, and the wearable tech and Rhino and drones is all part of their DNA. And the complexity of managing that right now with what we know from where we have come in our experience is actually we might have closed doors if we don't allow people like Jason's team and Stephanie to come in and talk to us about, please don't vomit on the panel, but like the art of the possible is something we need to start talking about, because the technology has changed so much and we can't even think about the scenarios yet. Sometimes we may be like the folks still using cassettes, and actually, you're using Spotify, Apple iTunes is just changing the way we think about these things. So Jason's really given us the foundation layer in how you can enable this. And for the CIOs on our attendees, this is not a throwaway and replace solution either. I think it's an augment and expand solution that we're talking about. And when we get the questions, if nobody asks that, I'm going to ask that again, because the worst thing for a South African is now, I've just invested in all of this USD kit and I got to chuck it all away. That isn't the message that I got yesterday. And I think we should expand on that, especially on our exchange rate. There's a question which came from the floor from Anonymous. That's quite an interesting name. How do you guard against bias in your technology? And I really think that's quite a topical one as well. I don't know if you want to take it on now, Stephanie or Jason, or if you want to think about it for a bit. But the bias could come in there in quite a few areas if operationally we're using it from a shopping perspective. Do you have anything on that?
What we've done is and we work very closely in many of these organizations with people or consultants that deal with digital transformation. So what we do is it's a combined effort. It's the collection of all of the data that can be modeled and trended in different platforms. So we are the collection of data, and we then usually imported that into whatever BI or digital transformation tool that would be used for trending and analysis. But Excellent. We've seen that it's when we start engaging with customers, I mean, I'm going to just use one quick example. When we deployed this in a mining environment, we deployed it in a large pit. And we basically just deployed it to have a look at object recognition. So we wanted to make sure that there wasn't any people in the pit just before blasting. But when we got all the business divisions together, we had security people asking, can we identify the speed of the vehicle so that they know about potential go slows, which have an impact on operations. Then we had to put on a camera to look inside the vehicle to see what is the quality of the material. We needed to count the number of trips because that ties back to the operations and the income of the day. So we have found that when we start talking within an organization, it may start off as a security-based conversation, and as we pull in the different divisions, those divisions come with the typical questions, and what we're doing is we're generating information that will be used in different BI tools. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Jason, I could see you were chomping. You wanted to make an answer there as well?
Look, I mean, just on bias, I guess, the data itself isn't biased. The data just collects. It's a repository. It's just ingesting information. It's what you do with it that will determine if there's bias or not. I think. The data is a baby that's just come out of the womb. It's going to be impressionable. You use it the way that you want.
Who pays for these solutions today, typically, Jason? Who signs the check?
So what we're seeing is, like Steph mentioned earlier, is that before, security was very much disjointed or separated even from IT. And traditionally, they haven't gotten on very well. Security, I don't like to use, old examples. Was a cop. He was a cop, and he was, the man, and he looked after everything, and that was the way that it is. Then IT came in, and they're the cool kids on the block. They know everything. I think it is converging. Security, I understand, like, this is not my cup of tea. Let me look after the operation. Let me look after the things that I'm good at, and I'm going to task IT with giving me the infrastructure that I require. That's what we're seeing quite a lot.
Excellent. So you see, Stephanie, do you see a seat at the table for marketing and for sales when you're putting these solutions together?
No, definitely. I know if you just look at the retail space itself, the information that you can generate, we've had a couple of examples where big retail chains collect marketing information and make that part of the offering to their tenants as a value-added service in terms of what is the demographics of the people that visit their shops, what is the movement, what is the trends, seasonal information. So this is information we can collect from the same one camera or multi-purpose sensor that you deployed for security. So there's definitely a huge application for that. As Jason said, it's a consultative process, but I think it's very important that you look at running the actual solution for yourself in your organization with specific parameters that we can measure. Because what we've seen is the minute that you've deployed it on a site, the actual use cases change. And the information that you can collect and the validity of the actual test itself changes completely. So it is definitely a consultative process.
Excellent. We've had quite a technical question asked here, which was the mention about using VxRail as HCI solution, but no mention on NVIDIA GPU hardware acceleration on video encoding to bring the X-Rail load down.
Yeah, I kind of get it.
Yeah, that Spanish talk only happens to me at 2 o'clock in the morning after a lot of a lockdown. So I don't know if you want to take that with 4 minutes left. I'm happy if you do.
Yeah, I can take that pretty quickly. So, so the VxRail is a hyperconverged environment that we're sort of promoting as this ready solution for IoT and video surveillance. And what we can do there is we can either incorporate GPU-based nodes into that VxRail cluster, or we can take that GPU appliance outside of that cluster and run the AI on dedicated. And we look at doing it both ways. Neither one is 100% better than the other. And it all comes down to customer preference at the end of the day. So the answer is we can do it.
Excellent. So what you've just done there is you've just proved that there is a stratification and there's a place for the deep technical guys, and they're still needed there to architect the solution. And then there's this layer up above, which is more of the business folk who are saying, let's use this data intelligently to increase throughput, get customers through the door, keep them there, keep our people alive, keep them operating, and let's be a company of the future. And, you know, I've seen a lot of digital transformation projects which start with great objectives and on the wall and all these big plans. And what you guys are doing is just taking it from the edge and saying, let's transform the business slowly, before they know it, they're living in the digital age. It's quite exciting. So we've got 4 minutes. I'm going to give Jason 2 minutes to wrap up.
I think, you know, really what we want to promote here is that Dell's not just a tin company. We're not just out there trying to push some disks and some CPUs and that sort of thing. You know, our division is quite a unique division within the Merat region. We're there to engineer solutions. We have subject matter experts, whether it be IoT, video surveillance, body-worn cameras, BI, and all that sort of thing. We've got those people to draw on. And that's what we're asking, is to get in front of the client with a partner like Datacentrix and say, guys, how do we help you? How do we fix your problems?
Steph?
Just to reiterate what Jason is saying, and I think that for me, the main message is really that surveillance has changed from where we come from, and it has now the power to take information from all of these sensors and generate actionable intelligence. And we're welcome to engage with you. I think it's very, very important to define your business problem as your first objective and then see where the information can be collected from to give you the necessary trends to take the right decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. From my side, it's really been a great experience to facilitate this. I wish we were around a table together. It would have been a lot nicer, but the fact that we can share this, really my learning has gone through the roof. I probably wouldn't have attended this call because I didn't know anything about anything. And thank you for sharing your knowledge about what it is. And if I was a marketing director, I would want to be on the next call because I think there's untapped potential. To you folk who are keeping us safe in the CCTV and the surveillance cameras already, thank you for everything that you've done. There's new tech out there. Go and buy some of it and enhance your operations even more. And then lastly, thank you for allowing me to be part of today.